Hello, friends. Welcome. Say hello, happy home. I'm happy to be here with you today on this Wednesday, March 4, 2026. And it's super, super foggy out in the great state of Minnesota in the southern half. Like pea soup foggy out there. Ooh. So I hope that Douglas will be safe. You know, he drives buses. So I hope that he's a safe bus driver today and he gets through his route quick and painlessly. But that's not what I want to talk to you about today. I want to talk to you about something. I got to read something to you. One of the things that's just been eating away at the back of my mind is why we have these ice riders. Why do we have people getting killed riding for dangerous illegal people? Why? Why are schools transitioning children to other genders and not informing the parents? Why do we have people that are committing grotesque amounts of fraud at the risk of being denaturalized, jailed, and protecting others who may or may not be legal immigrants, and doing it so brazenly? Well, a lot of people say, well, it's TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. But Trump derangement syndrome actually has some kind of a thing to it. But, Trump derangement syndrome, it's not a serious thing. I mean, it's not a seriously diagnosed thing. It's basically, pretty facetious and sarcastic at this point. But there's some science and some mental instability that I found in doing some research. I've been researching this for a while now because I've been trying to pinpoint what's going on. And I want to read this to you. So please be patient with me and the big reflectors here. I want to read a couple of definitions for you, and then we're going to talk and expand on them. The first one is something called pathological altruism. Pathological altruism is a concept studied in psychology and behavioral science. It describes helping others in ways that ultimately cause harm, either to the helper, the recipient, or others. Sacrificing your own safety or family to help someone destructive, enabling harmful behavior out of compassion, policies or actions intended to help but producing severe negative consequences. Remember that statement. Policies or actions. It's not necessarily a mental illness. However, it can be linked to underlying mental illnesses and traits, such as extreme empathy imbalance, codependency, trauma-driven people-pleasing, certain personality traits like excessive agreeableness, and sometimes narcissistic savior complexes. The other thing out there is suicidal empathy. These are informal terms, not clinical diagnoses, but nonetheless, someone with suicidal empathy, this person ignores obvious danger because they feel sorry for someone. Leaders make decisions that harm their own population out of excessive compassion for an opposing group. Leaders make decisions that harm their own population out of excessive compassion for an opposing group. Someone who repeatedly sacrifices themselves for destructive people. Does the brain play a role? Yes, it does. Empathy is strongly tied to brain function. The anterior insula, anterior cingulate cortex, mirror neuron networks, and prefrontal cortex, which is judgment and restraint. Healthy empathy is emotional empathy, feeling others' pain. Cognitive empathy is understanding the situations rationally. Now, I want to expand on that. Imagine, if you will, taking what I just defined to you, pathological altruism and suicidal empathy. And I want you to apply what I just read to you to the ice riders. Now, extend what I just said about suicidal empathy and pathological altruism to Renee Good, Alex Preddy, and others such as them. They were willing to kill and or be killed for something they didn't understand that was dangerous and destructive, such as preventing murderers, rapists, and really bad people from being arrested and removed from society. Now apply it to politicians, specifically here in Minnesota, where I just read policies and leadership bodies that will literally throw their own populations in front of a train to protect and preserve bad people, such as criminal illegals. And now expand that to our leadership at large, Congress, Senate, governors, mayors, a lot of these politicians that are in power right now. And think about their speeches and their false outrage, the policies that they're trying to force. It makes a lot of sense. Now, we have several generations behind me coming up. And I think it started back in the 80s and 90s when 911 came into being, in fact, when children would start to manipulate and threaten their parents. I'm going to call 911 if you don't give me my video game, if you don't let me watch this DVD. And parents became afraid. And governments allowed their social services to have widespread illegal and unethical control over the citizens of their cities, states, counties, whatever regions. And they were removing many children from homes legitimately, but now they were giving power to doctors, to law enforcement, to teachers, and allowing them, unqualified, unethical, biased people, to make determinations that if this kid was abused or neglected or whatever. And now these children are growing up believing, they're narcissists. And because they see modern conveniences evolving and growing and being discovered, such as cell phones, the internet, laptops, where the world is at your fingertips 24/7, a convenience. You don't have to get up off your couch. You can get on your phone now and have food delivered and so on and so forth. This is why we've become an entitled society. Because, I can just click a button on my phone and have that pizza delivered. They do my bidding. They come to me. I don't have to get up and go to them. And we have been rolling this psychological ball of shit from one generation into another generation and so on. And now bad people, sick, bad people are having children and raising them to be sick and bad. A good example of pathological altruism that I can come up with is that while we're having our morning coffee, while we're having dinner, we like to keep the TV on in the background, just for noise. And there was a cop show that came on, and I think it's called Midwest Safety. And there was an episode of this where two young women were at an airport with their mother, and the police were called because they had assaulted a an airline employee seriously enough that she needed to be carried off in an ambulance. And when the cops approached, the mother was physically getting between the cops and her daughters. She was like literally putting her hands like this in front of the children, the daughters who were adults. And she was encouraging their lies. She was withholding information. She was physically preventing the police officers from doing an investigation, finding out what happened. That is pathological altruism. And these are really bad girls. Ultimately, the girls called. They said, "Oh my God, we were pushed by this horrible man. This big giant man pushed me." Well, as it turned out, and there were witnesses and video and stuff, they were not pushed. The man that was there had no involvement in the physical altercation, and he wasn't big at all. But what had happened was this mother had allowed those daughters to become so shit-faced drunk at the airport prior to boarding the plane that they went into the bathroom and one of them was vomiting profusely. And under those physical critical conditions, the airline is not allowed to let you board and fly that plane. It is dangerous for you and everyone on board. You can't go up into the air in vacuum pockets and whatnot, vomiting because you have alcohol poisoning, because you, an 18-year-old, drank yourself into that state. So when the staff of the airline told them, "I'm sorry, you can't board like this," she, with all of her might, shoved this employee, shoved her hard, and then her sister jumped in and shoved even harder and knocked this woman to the ground and fractured at least one bone in her body. But they call the cops and say they were victimized, that they were denied boarding of their flight, that they had done nothing wrong. And the mom just continued to allow them to lie to the police and physically prevent the police from doing their job. Ultimately, after all of the delays and all the disruptions by mom and these ridiculously spoiled, entitled, nasty, vicious, icky girls, the girls were cuffed and arrested and thrown in a car. The mother is at fault. The mother, who is supposed to be setting the example, regardless of how old your children are, you are their parent. You are to be setting an example for the remainder of your life. She brought her daughters with that narcissistic, entitled, I am better than anybody attitude into an airport and sat them down and did nothing but allow them and encourage them to drink themselves into such a state of excessive drunkenness that one of them was vomiting profusely, quote unquote, from the witnesses in the bathroom into the toilet. What kind of mother loves her children to the point where she's going to let them get alcohol poisoning and commit an assault? A pathological, altruistic mom. Now, where would mom have gotten that kind of impression that was okay to be that kind of a parent? Well, she may have been raised that way. She may have a nasty, abusive husband, and she has learned to survive and her children's survival by protecting them to an extreme. We are raising generations of people who are afflicted with suicidal empathy, pathological altruism, and aggressive narcissism. And we can stop this by starting to recognize, acknowledge, heal, and treat these people one at a time. It's the best way we can do it. Get the word out and do it over the airwaves. But we can also start by stepping back and looking at the example that we are setting as adults for the children and the other adults in our families and in our workplaces. And of course, our communities at large. When my sister passed away, I believed that it was my duty and my surviving sister's duty to step up and be ready and available to set a good example of parenting, leadership, nurturing to my niece and nephews who were left behind after their mother died. Now, they were adults when she died, but she was not a good mother. She was not a good person. She was very, very sick. And sadly, none of us were able to get through to her to help her. But it was mine and my sister's duty as adults, as now matriarchs of the family, to step up and make our presence known, be available. But it's not good enough to just be available and say, hey, I'm here for you. You also must actually set an example, whether you are in their presence or not, talking to them, visiting with them, vacationing with them, on the phone with them, whatever. You still have to set the best examples by being the best person you can be and show them that things are possible. And hopefully some of your good leadership will rub off on the younger ones of your family, onto your siblings and others. One of the things that I learned most valuable from my parents was what not to do as an adult. I learned not to be abusive. I grew up in an incredibly abusive and violent home. And I learned that was bad and you don't do that. I learned that racism in my family was so extreme that my dad would actually fantasize and talk about killing people of color and killing gay men for fun. That's pathological altruism, when you are willing to kill or be killed. And in his case, it was to save the white population because he thought we were, I don't know, dwindling or something. Please. So I think there's something to this. I know there's at least one other person online that has mentioned suicidal empathy. It was just in a very brief, like 30-second clip that I saw online. I don't know the person. I don't know what they were talking about, broadly. But I think that it is something that we need to start saying out loud, saying in the public sphere, addressing our leadership, our politicians with this. What you're doing is defined as pathological altruism. What Preddy and Good did is suicidal empathy. Because when you turn this on these people and you start to put those words out into the universe, others will pick up the signal and they will start to look at this, and they might start to see this in themselves or their children. They might start to understand that there's a real problem here. There are many, many mental illnesses and many reasons that people are mentally ill. Mental illness is now an epidemic, like COVID level epidemic in our nation. But to say that it's mental illness is epidemic is a very, very wide net. What kind of epidemic? Are we talking bipolar depression? Are we talking narcissistic disorders? What are we talking about? Schizophrenia? Or are we talking about all of these balled into one and covered in a layer of pathological altruism and suicidal empathy, and couple that with bad parents that brought you up, knowing that you had a problem, not addressing that problem, putting you out into the world, feeling sorry for you? We've allowed too much lenience with our younger generations. And when you allow too much lenience, they don't know what to do. They're not equipped to make the decisions that we are expecting them to make. Free-range children, they can't be out there free-ranging. They're not equipped. Their brains are underdeveloped. They cannot rationalize, troubleshoot, navigate. They cannot distinguish between good and bad. They're going to get themselves killed. harmed, whatever. And you think you're doing them a favor? You're not. We need to get back to old world parenting, and I'm not saying beating your kids and making them get up at 4 a.m. doing chores, but giving them accountability and responsibility, setting the good example of right and wrong, explaining to them that absolute law is there to protect and preserve the rights of every American under the Constitution. Without laws, there is no Constitution. Without laws, there is no nation. Without laws, there is no safety. But we have failed to teach our younger generations this. And now they are cropping up as young adults with paranoid schizophrenia, bipolar depression, suicidal ideations. They're being radicalized by Islam and other terror groups. They're being lied to. They're being conditioned, brainwashed, and indoctrinated by really bad people who suffer from suicidal empathy and pathological altruism and narcissistic disorder. And they need others because misery loves company, and they need to feed on that. So they are being allowed, because nobody's paying attention, to teach our children in public school and in some churches. And online. So it starts with one really bad person convincing other people who are fragile of mind that they're right and the world is wrong. And it has created generations, mobs of pathological, altruistic, narcissistic, suicidal, empathetic individuals. So they are sick. They're sick, they're destructive, they're dangerous, and they are not a working, valid part of society. They're human beings, so they deserve love, compassion, protection. They deserve some kind of understanding and acceptance. But whether you are white, black, brown, gay, heterosexual, transgender, furry, whatever, you are an American in America. Therefore, you are protected by the Constitution of the United States of America. You have the same rights and protections as everybody else. And there are amendments to the Constitution, realistically, because our founding fathers didn't know about machine guns in their day. Second Amendment issues are cropping up all the time. They didn't know about civil and human rights involving the fact that maybe gay couples would actually want to be married and recognized. So there are amendments to the Constitution. And when we have hate crimes, and hate crimes are becoming really bad, serious hate crimes, now we have to, amend our Constitution to be sure that people understand that if you maim, torture, harass a transgender individual, deny them employment, deny them a hotel room, deny them, whatever, and discriminate against them, that it is, in fact, discrimination. So we do have to amend the Constitution here and there as we grow and evolve and move into the future as a nation as a whole. But we need to put a stop to the pathological altruism, the suicidal empathy, the narcissistic disorders that are plaguing 30 years of generations. Think about it. I know people get offended. Well, I didn't raise my kids. I take offense to that because I have kids and I raise kids. Well, I'm not picking people out of a crowd, okay? And if I believe that you have raised really good kids, I will tell you. And I have. There are really great parents out there, don't get me wrong. There are really good children out there. Don't get me wrong. There are. But what we're seeing in the streets of Minneapolis and Portland and other places all over the world, we are seeing mass groups of mentally ill people. And that's not hyperbole. That's not, they're crazy. No, this is legit. Look it up. Pathological altruism, suicidal empathy, narcissistic disorder. Look them up. Serial killers suffer from these things, especially the narcissistic part. and very bad politicians. Ilhan Omar, Jacob Frey, Tim Walz. They are willing to sacrifice the native Minnesotans, the Americans that are here, that were born and raised in Minnesota, all of us that live here, to sacrifice, steal our tax dollars and sacrifice our lives to harbor and protect illegal immigrants who are very sick and dangerous and have killed and killed and killed. These dysfunctions are prevalent in our judicial system, where we have judges repeatedly letting alcoholics out so they can go and kill somebody else again. They are letting dangerous people, like the woman stabbed on the bus last year. That guy had, over 30 convictions and criminals? Why was he out on the street? And this bullshit that, we just don't have enough housing, we just don't have enough people. Bullshit. There's plenty of places we can house them. We just need to get off our asses and find it. And figure it out. But when judges have pathological altruism, they're going to let those drunks out repeatedly. They are as much at fault for the harm that they cause as the drunks themselves. Imagine, if you will, a man gets, his wife leaves him. His dad dies. He goes out on a bender. He gets in his car. He's so shit-faced drunk that what does he do? He kills a family of 4 in a minivan, hitting them head on because he passed out from drinking and swerved into their lane. And the judge listens to his sob story and says, "Oh, shit, you poor guy. I'm really sorry the wife left you and your dad died. Wow, I understand you're under a lot of pressure. You know what? You just go home. You just go home. Yeah, I'm really sorry that 4 people died, but, you were in a bad way. Yeah, I get it. I do." And sends him on his way so he can kill more people. That is actually happening in our judicial system throughout our nation. These are sick people that should be tested and assessed before they put on the robe and step onto the bench, because they are circumventing the law, they are violating the law, and they are contributing to rape, murder, trafficking, drugs, terror, riots, constant, continued mental illness like drug abuse and alcohol abuse, because they are not nipping this shit in the bud day one, first crime. This letting people off with the warnings, it's your first offense, so you go. No, you make that first offense their last offense. You make it their last offense by making them accountable and getting them the medical help that they need right from the get-go. They won't be out there tearing around to kill people again. And if they do, then that judge and that judicial system can say, we did everything we could to stop it. But when you just pat them on the back, give them a Capri Sun and send them on their way, you are giving them a green light to harm again. That is your altruistic, pathological altruism and suicidal empathy. So we need to do more to vet people in power. Everyone from the beat cop on the sidewalk to the judge at the Supreme Court level. We need to weed these people out. We need to get them psychological and psychiatric help. And if they are not capable of following the law, then they need to be removed. So, suicidal empathy, narcissistic disorder, and pathological altruism are a mixed bag of mental disorders, deficiencies, disease, and illness. But they are plaguing, because, we're not paying attention, our judicial system, our law enforcement system, our political bodies, down to the riders on the street. And because of this indoctrination, this brainwashing into these afflictions, People like Alex Preddy and Renee Good are dead because they were dealing with suicidal empathy, pathological altruism, and they were willing to kill or be killed for a really bad cause. So look it up. Think about it. Leave me your comments, my loyal listener. I'd love to know how you feel about this. I'm seeing this, and I intend to continue talking about it until I hear more and more people online discussing this. And until next time, do good and be good.